Today I'm going to talk about a hot topic that comes up all the time when people are buying real estate in South Florida. And the topic is special assessments and what you need to know. And I'm going to get started right now. Hey everyone, my name's Jamie Pretzi. I'm a real estate agent here in South Florida. And today I'm going to talk to you about a very popular topic that comes up all the time, and that is, what do you need to know about special assessments? First, before I get started, if this is your first time here, hit the subscribe button so you never miss another update. I do put out new videos every week. Also, use the link in my information box and download our free guide today. Okay, let's get started. So in the early 2000s, a lot of buildings that were built in the 1960s, they started coming up for a certification because it was a 40-year certification that the city requires. So it was a lot of these older buildings around the city, and they were required to do this 40-year certification with our city. And what happened is these projects were very expensive because it deals with structural stuff, a lot of concrete restoration, maybe some electrical, elevator updates. There was just a lot of big projects within this 40-year certification that many of these buildings needed to do in order to meet the 40-year certification standards that were required at that time. So what happened was, in the early 2000s, a lot of buildings, they were run and managed very frugally. And because buildings didn't have the sort of habit of collecting these reserves on an ongoing basis, they had to pass these huge assessments in order to do these big projects required by the 40-year certification. Now, there are a lot of opinions about if buildings should fully fund reserves or not, but I'm just going to explain this in a really easy way that hopefully makes sense.
And before I start to explain a little bit more, I just wanted to add in here that some of these buildings may have actually been collecting reserves, but they just needed to pass a special assessment because the project was very large and expensive. And sometimes that can even happen today. If buildings are collecting reserves, maybe the reserve budget doesn't cover the cost of that project, so they have to pass a special assessment to finish up the project.
So every year when a building passes their budget, part of that passing the budget usually involves fully funding, partially funding, or not funding reserves. And reserves are like a savings account that the building can use for projects or something else down the road. That's a whole long detail. You have to speak with like a condo attorney to understand how a building can use reserves or not. But that's just a very easy way to explain it. So what happened was, in the early 2000s, these assessments started coming up, and then all of a sudden stuff started happening with our market, and our market crashed. So there was a combination between these really big assessments, the market, doing what it did. And so there was just a really big collision between these buildings not collecting a lot of money over the years to fund these big projects, and then these big projects coming up at one time. And it just was like a huge combustion of special assessments for buildings all over the city. I think that's sort of how this whole special assessment thing became a huge concern for a lot of people, because obviously special assessments got a bad reputation because of a lot of things that happened in our business here locally. I know that I'm just speaking on a local level, but it happened on a local level because, some of these smaller buildings had $10, $15, $20, $30,000 assessments that people now had to pay because they had not been collecting reserves all these years in order to manage these large projects that were on the horizon. A lot of buildings were very frugally run, and some still are today. But the biggest thing is that you know what you're buying into. For instance, if you're buying into a building where they do not collect any reserves and the maintenance is very low, I would highly recommend putting some money off on the side, because we live in a city by the sea, and the sun and the salt and the wind, we have big storms that come up from time to time. So it's just important to make sure you put some money off to the side if your building is not collecting reserves, because I can guarantee you that down the road there will probably be some type of extra expense that you will have to pay in order to keep the building up in decent shape. The biggest thing to know is that whenever you buy a property, especially in a condominium building, you are collectively buying with a lot of other people, and it's important to really review the budget and kind of get a feel for how they are maintaining that building throughout the year. Are they collecting reserves or not? And collecting reserves or not can also lead to another situation if you need financing. I am more than happy to discuss that. Probably I will soon. Assessments don't have to be super scary. You just need to know as a buyer what you're buying into every year. You're buying into a building where they don't collect reserves at all. You can probably expect that down the road there may be assessments because we need to do ongoing work on our buildings here. If you're buying into a building where they do fully fund reserves, that's a good sign that they are saving for a rainy day or for some big future projects down the road. The most important thing is to just take the time to understand what you're buying into and not be scared by people, freaking you out about special assessments. We live on the beach. Buildings have wear and tear, and they always need ongoing work. As long as you know that and you buy with that in mind, I think you'll be set to buy a great property here. If you have more questions about buying real estate in Miami or Miami Beach, I'm always here to be a resource for you, and I will see you soon.